Dark matter often sounds confusing because the name suggests something strange or unknowable. In reality, the idea grows out of very ordinary observations about motion and gravity. Nothing about it starts with mystery for its own sake. It begins with careful measurement and a simple question. Does what we see account for how things move? Consider a galaxy as a vast system of stars orbiting a common center. Gravity provides the attraction that keeps those stars bound together. By measuring how fast stars move at different distances from the center, it becomes possible to estimate how much mass must be present. This approach works reliably for familiar systems such as planets around the sun. When astronomers applied the same reasoning to galaxies, something unexpected appeared. Stars far from the center moved much faster than a visible matter could justify. The stars D and dust that telescopes revealed did not provide enough gravitational influence to explain the motion. The galaxy behaved as though it contained much more mass than could be seen. At first, this seemed like a measurement problem. Instruments improved. Data sets expanded. The result remained. The same mismatch appeared across many galaxies and later in large collections of galaxies. Motion consistently pointed to additional mass spread well beyond the bright regions. At that point, the issue could not be dismissed. Either gravity behaved differently on large scales or a large amount of matter influenced motion without interacting with light. Dark matter enters as a name for that missing influence. The term does not describe what it is made of. It describes how it behaves. It refers to whatever produces gravitational effects without emitting or absorbing light. This way of thinking fits naturally within physics. Physical existence does not depend on visibility. It depends on measurable influence. Long before air was understood, its effects on motion and pressure made its presence undeniable. Dark matter occupies a similar logical role, though on cosmic scales, evidence extends beyond galaxy rotation. Light passing near massive clusters bends more than visible matter alone predicts. The large-scale structure of the universe forms in ways that require additional gravitational influence early in cosmic history. Each observation points to unseen mass shaping space and motion. A deeper question follows naturally. Does this unseen influence come from a new kind of matter, or does it signal a need to revise how gravity behaves across vast distances? Both ideas aim to explain the same observations. Understanding dark matter begins with accepting that gravity responds to mass. Whether that mass shines or not, following that influence carefully leads deeper into how matter, gravity, and the structure of space itself fit together. Following that influence leads straight into how dark matter becomes more than a label and turns into a measurable part of modern physics. One of the clearest moments came in the 1970s through the work of astronomer Vera Rubin working with Kent Ford. Rubin studied how stars move within spiral galaxies, according to gravitational reasoning that works everywhere else. Stars farther from the center should move more slowly, much like distant planets around the sun. What Rubin found refused to follow that expectation. The outer stars moved at nearly the same speed as inner ones. The motion traced a flat curve rather than a declining one. That result carried sharp implications. Either gravity changed its behavior at galactic scales, or far more mass surrounded the galaxy than telescopes revealed. Rubin's careful measurements repeated across many galaxies pushed the idea unseen mass from speculation into necessity. From there, the concept grew stronger through independent methods. One of the most striking involves how massive objects bend light. Einstein's description of gravity predicts that mass curves the paths of light traveling nearby. Astronomers use this effect called gravitational lensing to map where mass resides. In the early 2000s, observations of a system known as the bullet cluster, analyzed by Douglas Clough and collaborators, showed something remarkable. Ordinary matter visible as hot gas slowed and piled up after a collision between two galaxy clusters. The gravitational influence traced by lensing appeared somewhere else entirely. The dominant mass passed through with little interaction. That separation mattered. It showed that the unseen mass behaved differently from familiar matter. It clumped, gravitationally yet barely interacted through collisions or light. Gravity revealed its presence even where visible. Matter lagged behind. These observations point toward what dark matter represents. At a fundamental level, dark matter functions as a source of gravity that interacts very weakly, if at all, through other known forces. It contributes mass energy to space, shapes, motion, and influences how structures form while remaining largely indifferent to light, heat, and ordinary collision. This challenges everyday assumptions deeply. In daily life, matter announces itself through sight, touch, resistance, or heat. Mass seems inseparable from substance, you can point to. On cosmic scales, that intuition breaks down. Motion responds to gravity alone, not to visibility. A star follows the gravitational landscape laid out by all mass present, regardless of whether that mass glows. Physicists model dark matter using this principle. Instead of asking what it looks like, they ask how much gravitational influence appears necessary at each location to account for observed motion and lensing. Computer simulations then distribute dark matter in extended halos around galaxies and clusters. When these models evolve forward in cosmic time, they reproduce the large-scale structure seen in surveys, filaments, clusters, and voids arranged in a vast web. This success matters. It shows that treating dark matter as a real component of the universe leads to consistent predictions across independent observations. The same invisible mass explains galaxy, rotation, cluster dynamics, lensing, maps, and the growth of structure from the early universe. At the deepest level, currently accessible dark matter represents mass that participates fully in gravity while remaining largely disconnected from electromagnetic processes. It behaves as matter in the gravitational sense, contributing to how space responds and how motion unfolds. Without behaving like atoms, gas, or dust, that realization reshapes how matter itself gets defined. Matter no longer requires visibility, solidity, or chemical structure. Gravitational influence becomes the defining feature. If something shapes motion persistently and consistently, physics treats it as real. This view also explains why dark matter fits naturally into descriptions of space and time. Gravity responds to energy and mass regardless of form. Space curves and motion responds based on total content, not on what that content looks like. Dark matter enters those equations seamlessly because gravity already accounts for unseen contributors. What remains uncertain concerns composition. Many candidates exist, ranging from new elementary particles to more complex possibilities. Experiments search for rare interactions deep underground in particle accelerators and through astrophysical signals. None have yet delivered a definitive answer. What remains firm lies in the gravitational evidence. Dark matter at this stage stands as a measured component of the universe, inferred through multiple independent techniques. It represents how much mass must exist for space, motion, and structure to behave the way observations show. Understanding it means accepting that the universe carries substance beyond what eyes and instruments tuned to light can reveal, and that gravity serves as the guide linking the unseen to everything that moves within it. As dark matter takes its place within physical descriptions, its consequences begin to appear across many areas at the same time. Observations that once felt isolated start to support each other, and familiar ideas about matter, structure, and influence lose their apparent simplicity. The large-scale arrangement of the universe offers one of the clearest examples. Galaxies do not scatter randomly. They collect along immense filaments, surround vast empty regions, and assemble into clusters, connected by long strands of mass. Early attempts to explain this structure using only visible matter ran into a timing problem. Ordinary matter interacting strongly with radiation in the early universe could not gather quickly enough under gravity to form the structures observed today. Introducing dark matter resolves this tension naturally. Dark matter begins clumping early before atoms form and before light moves freely through space. It supplies gravitational wells that deepen over time. Ordinary matter later falls into these wells, cools, and forms stars and galaxies. Structure develops in a sequence that matches observation without repeated adjustments. From this perspective, Galaxies appear less like independent systems and more like visible highlights, tracing an underlying framework. Their shapes, motions, and distributions reflect a deeper mass arrangement that remains unseen. This leads to an unexpected reversal of intuition. Human senses treat visible matter as dominant because it announces itself. On cosmic scales, gravity responds to total mass regardless of appearance. The universe organizes itself according to what contributes gravitational influence, not according to what emits light. Time itself enters the story in a revealing way. The timeline of cosmic evolution aligns far more smoothly when dark matter is included. Small density differences present early on grow at rates consistent with observation. Galaxies form neither too early nor too late. Clusters assemble when expected. A single additional component resolves multiple chronological puzzles at once. Gravitational lensing reinforces this unified picture. Light bends when passing through regions of mass, allowing astronomers to map where gravitational influence resides. These maps repeatedly show mass distributed beyond the boundaries of visible matter. Extended halos surround galaxies and clusters revealing smooth mass distributions without sharp edges. Here, everyday reasoning begins to fail. Mass feels naturally tied to compact objects with clear boundaries. Dark matter spreads over large regions, forming halos that resist collapse into dense structures. This distribution explains why galaxies remain bound even when their stars move rapidly. The motion reflects the presence of an extended gravitational environment rather than a concentrated core. Another tension arises from how dark matter interacts. In ordinary matter, interactions leave traces: heat, light, friction, radiation. Dark matter interacts powerfully through gravity, while remaining almost indifferent to other forces. During collisions between galaxy clusters, ordinary gas slows and heats, while dark matter continues onward, detectable only through its gravitational influence. This challenges assumptions about interaction and causality. Influence often feels inseparable from exchange. Dark matter demonstrates that gravity alone suffices to connect systems and shape motion without exchanging light or heat. Causality remains intact because influence still propagates through space, even if it does so through a single channel. A broader picture emerges. The universe resembles a gravitational network in which different components participate differently. Ordinary matter interacts richly through many forces, but contributes modestly to gravity on large scales. Dark matter contributes strongly to gravity, while interacting weakly otherwise. Each component shapes cosmic behavior through its own interaction profile. Early skepticism treated dark matter as a placeholder for error. Over time, mismatches appeared repeatedly and independently. Galaxy rotation, lensing, cluster dynamics, and structure formation all pointed toward the same missing contribution. Adding dark matter did not patch individual discrepancies, it revealed a shared cause. This coherence explains why dark matter remains difficult to detect directly. Instruments designed to capture light or heat cannot register something that barely engages with those processes. Its presence must be inferred through motion, lensing, and large-scale structure. Physics already relies on inference in many domains. Gravity itself announces its existence only through effects. This reliance on inference carries an important implication. The universe does not restrict itself to what human senses evolved to detect. Perception samples a narrow band of reality. Physics expands that band by following consistent effects wherever they lead, even beyond direct observation. Dark matter also reshapes how space itself is understood. Gravity links mass energy to the geometry of space-time. If most mass resides in dark matter, then large-scale curvature reflects that unseen contribution. The paths galaxies follow, the way light bends, and the formation of structure all depend on it. This places dark matter at the center, rather than the margins of cosmology. The universe responds primarily to what weighs the most, not to what shines the brightest. Computer simulations highlight this point vividly. Models that include dark matter evolve into structures resembling observed surveys, complete with filaments, clusters, and voids. Models that excluded fail in systematic ways. Structures appear late, thin, or incomplete. Each failure points back to the same missing ingredient. Viewed individually, these observations might invite separate explanations. Taken together, they form a consistent narrative. Motion, lensing, timing, and structure all trace the same. Gravitational influence. The meaning of dark matter extends beyond accounting for missing mass. It indicates that physical reality includes components operating outside direct detection, shaping outcomes through long-term, large-scale influence. This does not diminish ordinary matter. It places it within a wider context. Stars and planets become visible expressions of deeper gravitational organization. What shines follows what weighs. Understanding dark matter in this way changes how explanation itself works. Instead of relying on appearance, physics relies on convergence. Multiple independent measurements pointing toward the same unseen cause outweigh the absence of direct detection. Dark matter connects gravity, motion, space, and cosmic history into a unified framework. Each reinforces the others. What once appeared as scattered anomalies now reads as different perspectives on the same underlying structure. That realization carries an important implication. The universe remains intelligible even when much of it lies beyond immediate perception. Careful attention to effects leads to coherence rather than confusion. Dark matter does not sit alongside the story of the universe. It runs through it, shaping how matter gathers, how structures form, and how motion unfolds across vast distances. Understanding that thread transforms many isolated puzzles into a connected picture, revealing a universe that proves larger, yet no less ordered than it first appears. When all the pieces are viewed together, dark matter settles into a clear role rather than remaining a loose hypothesis. It provides a consistent way to understand how the universe behaves on the largest scales, tying motion, structure, and stability into a single picture supported by many observations. Galaxies rotate as they do because they sit inside extended regions of unseen mass. Clusters remain bound because additional gravitational influence surrounds them. Light bends along paths shaped by more mass than telescopes reveal. Large-scale structure forms early and grows in the right way because extra gravitational influence shapes space long before stars appear. Together, these facts reinforce one explanation. This convergence marks what physics treats as firmly established. A substantial amount of matter contributes gravitationally across the universe while remaining largely invisible to light and ordinary interactions. Its presence is inferred through motion, lensing, and structure, and those inferences agree across different methods, scales, and errors. Removing this component breaks that agreement, including it restores consistency. What remains uncertain lies in the details rather than the existence. The exact nature of dark matter remains unknown. Its composition, internal properties, and origin resist direct detection. Experiments search for rare interactions. Observations probe subtle effects. The absence of a definitive identification sets the boundary of current knowledge. This balance between confidence and uncertainty matters. Dark matter does not represent the missing piece filled in by guesswork. It represents a component required by evidence, even as its deeper description remains incomplete. Its strength lies in how many independent observations it unifies without contradiction, including dark matter reshapes how stability itself is understood. Systems remain intact not only because of what shines within them, but because of what weighs around them. Motion responds to total gravitational influence, not to visibility. Structure follows mass, whether that mass announces itself or not. This perspective alters how familiar scenes are interpreted. The night sky no longer appears as a collection of isolated lights scattered across emptiness. Each bright point traces a deeper gravitational environment shared with countless others. What can be seen marks only a fraction of what governs motion and form. Dark matter also clarifies why the universe remains intelligible. The same principles explain galaxies, clusters, and cosmic structure without changing rules from one scale to another. Gravity responds consistently. Motion follows predictably. Stability emerges naturally. The practical takeaway rests here. Reality extends beyond direct detection, and physics follows influence rather than appearance. Some of the most important contributors to how the universe behaves do not announce themselves through light, heat, or touch. They reveal themselves through what they shape over time. Understanding dark matter encourages a broader view of existence. What matters most is not always what stands out, but what holds everything else together. The universe evolves under the guidance of influences that operate indirectly yet persistently, shaping motion, structure, and history across vast distances.
January 28, 1986, Washington, D.C. The Rogers Commission hearing room. NASA engineers stand before Congress, presenting their analysis of why the Space Shuttle Challenger exploded 73 seconds after launch, killing 7 astronauts. The presentation is immaculate. Thermal dynamics calculations flash across screens, solid rocket booster joint rotation angles, material stress analyses, putty performance parameters under variable atmospheric conditions. The engineers have PhDs from MIT, decades of aerospace experience, security clearances that took years to obtain. Their credentials fill entire walls. The room of officials and scientists nods along, scribbling notes, following the complex equations. Then Richard Feynman, Nobel Prize-winning physicist, pulls a small piece of rubber and a glass of ice water from under the table. No warning, no preamble. He drops the rubber O-ring into the ice water. The room goes quiet, cameras zoom in. He waits exactly 10 seconds, pulls it out, squeezes it between his fingers. The rubber doesn't bounce back. It stays compressed, rigid, dead. Feynman looks at the camera and says, "I believe that has some significance for our problem." 10 seconds. A child's science experiment. Months of expert testimony destroyed. But what he did in that moment wasn't about the Challenger disaster. It revealed a systematic method for exposing fake expertise that works in any field, with anyone, at any time. A toolkit that destroys the illusion of knowledge instantly. The reason why changes everything about who you trust and why. Society trains us from childhood to worship credentials. The person with the degree knows more. The person with the title deserves respect. The person with the impressive job must be competent. We learn this in school, reinforce it in corporate environments, and carry it into every interaction where someone presents themselves as an expert. This creates a catastrophic blind spot. Because credentials prove you passed. Institutional tests. They prove you navigated bureaucratic requirements. They prove you can memorize information and repeat it on command. But credentials prove absolutely nothing about whether you understand reality. The NASA engineers at the Rogers Commission had impeccable credentials. Aerospace engineering degrees from top universities, years of experience at the world's premier space agency, published research papers, security clearances, awards. They presented thermal expansion coefficients, complex material science data, engineering specifications that would take hours to verify. Feynman had a different question. Does the rubber work in the cold? He didn't care about their degrees. He didn't need to verify their equations. He wanted to see physical evidence with his own eyes. He wanted to watch the phenomenon happen in real time. This created a problem. Because the moment you demand simple physical demonstration, fake expertise collapses immediately. The pattern appears everywhere. Your LinkedIn feed full of thought leaders with impressive job histories who can't explain basic concepts. TED speakers with 19-minute presentations that sound profound but contain zero actionable truth. Business consultants with frameworks that repackage common sense using expensive jargon. Wellness gurus with credentials who make claims that contradict each other monthly. Impressive delivery, confident tone, complex language that sounds intelligent. But can they show you the phenomenon? Can they demonstrate it simply? Can they admit what they don't know? Feynman built a systematic toolkit for answering these questions. To understand how it works, we need to see what he actually did when confronting experts who didn't understand their own field. The Challenger investigation began weeks before that televised moment. February 1986. Feynman joins the Rogers Commission, travels to NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center in Huntsville, Alabama. The engineers present their analysis, joint rotation dynamics, O-ring compression behavior, zinc chromate primer adhesion coefficients under thermal stress. Feynman sits in the back, taking notes in his peculiar style, not writing down their conclusions, but writing down his own questions. During a break, he approaches the NASA managers. His question, documented in the Rogers Commission report, what happens to the O-rings when they get cold? They explain. Thermal contraction rates in elastomer compounds, temperature-dependent material science specifications, engineering tolerances within acceptable parameters. Feynman asks, "Can I see one?" They look confused but provide an O-ring sample from the solid rocket booster. Standard procedure. Feynman holds it, examines it, squeezes it at room temperature, then asks, "Can I get some ice water?" The managers exchange glances. This isn't standard procedure. Feynman walks to the cafeteria, gets his own glass of ice water, returns to the conference room. February 11th, 1986, the televised hearing. NASA officials mid-testimony explaining their findings. Feynman interrupts, pulls out the O-ring, drops it into the ice water he brought with him, waits while cameras capture the moment, removes it, squeezes it. The rubber stays compressed, doesn't return to its original shape, has lost its elasticity. As he later wrote in, "What do you care what other people think?" I took the model and squeezed it, and sure enough, that was it. No equations, no thermal dynamics models, no aerospace credentials needed. Just reality demonstrating itself. The cognitive shift Feynman made reveals the first principle of his fake expert detection system. If someone cannot show you the phenomenon directly in simple physical terms, they might not understand it themselves. Fake experts rely on abstraction because concrete demonstration exposes gaps in understanding. Real experts can always reduce complexity to observable physical reality. They can show you the thing happening. Feynman's mental model operated on a fundamental assumption. Nature doesn't care about your theories, your credentials, or your elegant mathematical models. What does the actual object do under actual conditions? That's the only question that matters. While NASA hid behind institutional authority and complex presentations, Feynman asked the question a curious child would ask. What happens if it gets cold? Then he tested it, publicly, undeniably. This wasn't about being contrarian. This was about demanding that expertise prove itself through physical demonstration, not through impressive-sounding explanations. When your marketing agency presents their strategy using terms like omni-channel synergy optimization and AI-enhanced consumer journey mapping, ask them to show you the last campaign results in a simple spreadsheet. Dates, metrics, costs, conversions. If they can't produce this immediately, you're dealing with sophisticated language covering for uncertain results. When a financial advisor explains their approach using algorithmic hedging strategies with machine learning, portfolio rebalancing, asked to see their personal investment returns over the past 5 years. Real money, real results. If they hesitate or deflect to theoretical models, you've found someone who can explain investing, but perhaps cannot do it. When a business consultant offers paradigm-shifting transformation and frameworks leveraging agile methodologies, ask which specific company implemented this framework and what the measurable before and after numbers were. Revenue, retention, productivity. Concrete metrics. If they provide case studies full of vague success language instead of hard data, they're selling fog. The moment someone cannot demonstrate simply, you've identified fake expertise. But Feynman's system went deeper. 3 years before Challenger, decades before his Nobel Prize, he encountered a different form of fake expertise that revealed a second principle. Centro, Brasileiro de Pesquisas Físicas, Rio de Janeiro. Feynman spends 10 months teaching physics to Brazilian university students. The students are impressive. They memorize formulas perfectly. They ace every examination. They solve complex differential equations. They can recite principles of electromagnetism, thermodynamics, quantum mechanics. Feynman watches them succeed by every traditional metric. Then he notices something disturbing. He asks a student, "What is Brewster's angle?" The student responds immediately, perfectly. It's the angle at which light reflected from a surface is completely polarized. Textbook definition. Exactly correct. Feynman asks, "Have you ever seen this phenomenon?" The student looks confused, searches for the answer in his memory. Can't find it. Feynman points to the bay outside the classroom window. Look at the water. At what angle is the reflection brightest? That's Brewster's angle. You've seen it your entire life every time you look at water or glass. but you never connected the formula to the physical reality you observe daily. As Feynman describes in Surely You're Joking, Mr. Feynman, after a lot of investigation, I finally figured out that the students had memorized everything, but they didn't know what anything meant. They could pass examinations, they could learn all this material and not know anything at all. The student had the credential, passing grades, had the knowledge, correct definitions, but couldn't recognize the phenomenon in the world around him. The formula existed in his mind as disconnected information, not as a description of observable reality. This revealed Feynman's second principle. Fake experts can repeat information perfectly. Real experts can translate the same concept multiple ways and show you where it manifests in physical reality. The cognitive pattern distinguishes memorization from understanding. Memorizers have one path, question to memorized answer. Understanders have multiple paths. The concept connects to reality, to analogies in different fields, to predictions about what happens when variables change, to physical demonstrations, to simple explanations using everyday language. Feynman's test operated systematically. Can you explain this without using technical terminology? Can you show me where this happens in the observable world? Can you predict what changes if I modify one variable? Can you connect this principle to something I already understand? If the answer to any of these is no, you're encountering sophisticated memorization presenting itself as expertise. When your doctor diagnoses a condition, ask them to explain what's physically happening inside your body, using an analogy to something you understand. Real doctors can do this instantly. They understand the biological mechanism deeply enough to translate it. Doctors who can only repeat medical terminology might be following diagnostic protocols without understanding the underlying biology. When a software developer explains their solution, ask them to show you what the code actually does, step by step, in plain language. Developers who truly understand their code can translate it to human logic. Developers who copy-paste it from Stack Overflow can only point to the code itself. When a social media marketing expert presents their strategy, ask them to explain why it works using basic human psychology, not industry jargon. Real experts understand the psychological mechanisms driving engagement. Fake experts know the platform features, but not why humans respond to them. The ability to translate between abstraction and reality, to explain concepts multiple ways, to show physical manifestations, this separates understanding from memorization. But Feynman discovered something even more insidious, a form of fake expertise that combined credentials, publications, institutional authority, and sophisticated language while containing almost zero actual knowledge. June 1974. Caltech. Commencement ceremony. Feynman delivers the graduation address. The speech becomes legendary. Cargo, cult, science. The title references South Pacific Islanders who built fake airplane landing strips after World War II. They carved runways into jungle clearings, built control towers from bamboo, wore wooden headphones. They copied every visible form of an airport, hoping cargo planes would return with supplies. The planes never came. Feynman's thesis: they follow all the apparent precepts and forms of scientific investigation, but they're missing something essential. Then he turns this accusation on modern academia, psychology departments, educational research, social sciences, fields full of credentialed PhDs, peer-reviewed publications, university appointments, conference presentations, research grants. His charge, documented in the published speech: these fields use scientific language but lack scientific integrity. They cherry-pick data supporting their hypotheses. They don't publish negative results. They ignore contradictory evidence. They mistake correlation for causation. They design experiments that cannot fail to confirm their assumptions. They have the form of science, the credentials, the publications, the institutional authority, but they're missing intellectual honesty. Feynman says, the first principle is that you must not fool yourself, and you are the easiest person to fool. This reveals his third principle. Complex jargon often camouflages ignorance, not sophistication. The cognitive pattern operates predictably. The more uncertain someone feels about their knowledge, the more complex their language becomes. Jargon serves as defensive armor. If you don't understand what they're saying, you can't challenge whether they're right. Real experts simplify because they understand the core mechanism clearly enough to strip away unnecessary complexity. Fake experts complexify because they're hiding, consciously or unconsciously, that they don't fully grasp the fundamentals. When a crypto influencer cannot explain blockchain technology without saying, decentralized, trustless, immutable ledger paradigm, leveraging cryptographic consensus mechanisms, they probably don't understand it well enough to teach it to a curious teenager. When a leadership coach uses phrases like synergistic collaboration frameworks optimizing human capital throughput instead of helping people work together more effectively, they're selling expensive fog. When a nutritionist cannot explain their dietary recommendations without terms like metabolic optimization through macronutrient periodization and circadian rhythm alignment, ask yourself, are they understanding something complex or covering for something simple they've overcomplicated? But Feynman's fourth principle cuts even deeper than detecting jargon. It exposes the ultimate test of fake expertise. In the Cargo Cult Science speech, Feynman gives specific examples. Educational psychology, papers about teaching methods that measure student engagement and participation metrics, but never measure whether students actually learned anything. The papers get published, the researchers get tenure, the methods get implemented in schools, but nobody asks, did test scores improve? Can students apply the knowledge? Do they remember it a year later? The researchers avoid these questions because the answers might disprove their theories. Feynman's conclusion: we have learned from much experience that all philosophical intuitions about what nature is going to do fail. Translation: your elegant theories, your impressive credentials, your institutional authority, nature doesn't care. Reality doesn't negotiate. Either your model predicts observable outcomes, or it doesn't. This reveals the fourth principle. Real experts constantly admit limitations and uncertainties. Fake experts never acknowledge what they don't know. Intellectual honesty requires saying, "I don't know," regularly. Requires admitting when evidence contradicts your position. Requires changing your mind publicly when proven wrong. Requires acknowledging the limits of current understanding. Fake experts never do this. They cannot afford to. Their authority depends on appearing omniscient within their domain. Admitting uncertainty threatens their credibility, but actual competence operates oppositely. The more you understand a field, the more you recognize how much remains unknown, how many variables remain unmeasured, how many mechanisms remain poorly understood. When a cryptocurrency expert cannot admit we don't fully understand the long-term economic implications of deflationary monetary policy, they're lying through omission. When a leadership consultant cannot acknowledge some personality types respond poorly to this framework and we're not sure why, they are pretending certainty where none exists. When a health influencer never says, the research on this is conflicting and we need better studies, they're choosing authority over honesty. Real experts say, I don't know, constantly. They point out contradictory evidence. They acknowledge competing theories. They admit where their model breaks down. This isn't weakness. This is the only intellectually honest position when dealing with complex systems that exceed current understanding. When you combine Feynman's four principles, you get a systematic toolkit that works in any field, with any claimed expert, in any context. First, demand physical evidence. Show me the actual phenomenon, not your description of it. Second, test understanding through translation. Explain it differently. Show me where this appears in observable reality. Connect it to something I already understand. Third, identify jargon as potential camouflage. Can you say this in simple language? If not, why not? Fourth, require intellectual honesty. What don't you know? What evidence contradicts your position? What are the limitations of this approach? This is why Feynman exposed NASA's institutional failure, destroyed cargo cult science, and revolutionized physics education. But more importantly, this reveals something uncomfortable about how modern society manufactures authority. We've built entire industries around credentialed expertise that cannot pass these simple tests. Business consultants who've never built businesses. Leadership coaches who've never led organizations. financial advisors who underperform index funds, education experts whose students don't learn, health professionals who cannot demonstrate measurable outcomes. They have the credentials, the titles, the institutional backing, the impressive presentations, but they cannot show you the phenomenon simply, cannot explain it multiple ways, cannot simplify their language, cannot admit uncertainty. Feynman had a Nobel Prize, the ultimate credential in physics. Yet, he spent his life demonstrating that credentials prove nothing about understanding reality. As he said in his Nobel lecture, the thing that doesn't fit is the most interesting. The thing that doesn't fit in our society. We've constructed massive industries that reward the appearance of expertise over actual competence, that mistake complexity for sophistication, that confuse credentials with understanding. You don't need a physics degree to use Feynman's toolkit. You don't need to be a genius. You need to stop accepting institutional authority as proof of knowledge. You need to stop letting jargon intimidate you into submission. You need to demand that expertise prove itself through observable reality, not through impressive-sounding abstractions. You need to pull out the equivalent of ice water and a rubber O-ring in every field you encounter. Ask the simple question. Demand the physical test. Watch what happens. Feynman's confrontations with fake expertise reveal something most people never consider. The vast majority of fields reward navigating institutions successfully, not understanding reality accurately. Credentials, publications, conference invitations, prestigious appointments, these prove you can play the academic or corporate game. They don't prove you can see clearly. The critical thinking toolkit he demonstrated isn't about being skeptical of everything. It's about being systematic in distinguishing between people who understand physical reality and people who've memorized impressive-sounding descriptions of reality. Show me. Explain differently. Simplify. Admit uncertainty. 4 tests. Every fake expert fails at least one, usually all 4. But this detection system was just the foundation. Feynman used another technique that most people get completely wrong, how he actually learned complex topics from scratch without relying on experts at all. That system, the one that let him rebuild quantum electrodynamics from first principles while others copied textbooks, operates on logic that destroys everything universities teach about learning. The method remains hidden in plain sight, visible only to those who know where to look.
I want you to really think about something for a moment, because there is a fundamental misunderstanding that plagues our society, a misconception that limits human potential more than any other factor. People often come to me and say, I am not creative, I am logical, I do not have that gift. They speak of creativity as if it were a noun, a possession, like having blue eyes or a tall stature. But let me tell you, that is scientifically and philosophically incorrect. Creativity is not a noun. It is a verb. It is something you do, not something you have. Just as you do not wake up and simply have focus or motivation, you must generate them. You must also generate creativity. Consider children. If I were to walk into a kindergarten class right now and ask, who here is an artist? Every single hand would shoot up. They do not hesitate. They do not judge themselves. They simply explore. But somewhere along the line, we learn to fear being wrong. We learn to conform. We stop doing creativity and start waiting for it to strike like lightning. The secret is, you are already one of the gifted few. The machinery is there. You have simply forgotten how to operate it because you have retreated into what I call the cocoon. Let me illustrate this with a case study that might change how you view your daily interaction. Imagine you are on a flight. You have the aisle seat, and the middle seat is empty. You are comfortable. You are hoping, perhaps praying, that nobody sits there. Then, an elderly woman walks down the aisle. She looks different, perhaps a bit disheveled. Your instinct, the instinct of the cocoon, is to pull away. You put on your headphones. You isolate yourself with your music, perhaps listening to something sophisticated like Stravinsky's Firebird Suite, feeling very intellectual. You spend 5 hours sitting 5 inches away from this woman, ignoring her completely. Then, as the plane descends, she taps you on the shoulder. You discover in the last 30 seconds of the flight that she was actually a close friend of Igor Stravinsky. She was with him when he wrote the very music you were listening to. You see, by staying in your cocoon, by avoiding the uncomfortable or the different, you missed a connection to history. You missed a spark. And this is exactly how we kill our own ideas. The key is to understand that creativity is, at its core, simply the act of connecting dots. That is all it is. It is not creating something out of nothing. It is taking two distinct elements, a horse and the bar, a phone and the internet, and finding the surprising link between them. Now imagine your mind as a collection of these dots. These dots represent your experiences, the people you meet, the books you read. Here is the problem most professionals face. If you are an accountant and you only talk to accountants and you only read accounting journals, your collection of dots is identical. It is a sheet of navy blue dots, all 3/4 inches wide. And if you only have navy blue dots, you can only create navy blue ideas. They are predictable, they are safe, and they are utterly forgettable. To have an idea so powerful it feels illegal, you need a red dot, you need a green dot, you need to introduce a variable that does not belong. History proves this time and time again. Look at the printing press. Johannes Gutenberg did not invent the wine press, and he did not invent movable type. He simply saw two existing dots and connected them in a way nobody else had. Look at the Beatles. They connected blues, Motown, and skiffle. This is why innovation almost always comes from outside the industry. If you are inside the automotive industry, you are taught the limitations of that industry. You need an outsider, someone like Elon Musk, for instance, to look at the problem without those pre-existing limitations and ask a different question. You need to understand this. The quality of your output is determined entirely by the diversity of your input. You must become a dot collector. You have to consciously crack that cocoon. Instead of looking at a problem with your standard logical toolkit, you need to ask, how would a biologist solve this? How would a musician approach this? But collecting the dots is only the first step. It is the raw material. The actual processing, the synthesis of these ideas requires a specific state of mind. We often think we need to grind harder, focus more, and drink more coffee to have a breakthrough. But biologically, that is often the worst thing you can do. The brain states required for execution are not the same as the brain states required for imagination. There is a reason why your best ideas do not come when you are staring at a spreadsheet, but rather when you're in the shower or drifting off to sleep. We need to talk about how to access those states on command. We need to talk about how to turn your brain into a laboratory that works for you, even when you are not consciously trying. Because once you have collected the dots, you need to know how to let them collide. So, now that we have talked about collecting these dots, these little pieces of the puzzle, we run into a bit of a problem. You see, you can have all the dots in the world. You can have a head full of facts and experiences. But if you don't know how to mix them, they are just clutter. It's like having a garage full of car parts, but no mechanic to put them together. The engine won't run. And this is where things get really interesting, because most of us are trying to force creativity while we are in the wrong gear. We are running around in what scientists call the beta state. That is when you are wide awake, alert, stressed, trying to get things done. But trying to be creative in that state is like trying to plant a garden in the middle of a highway. It's just too fast. The soil isn't right. The secret is you have to slow the machine down. You have to find the gaps between the noise. Have you ever noticed, and I mean really noticed, that your best ideas never come when you are sitting at your desk, staring at a blank screen, gritting your teeth? No, they come when you are in the shower, or when you are driving down a long, boring road, or right when you are drifting off to sleep. Why is that? Is it the water? Is it the soap? No, it's the brain wave. When you relax, when you step away from the problem, your brain shifts down into alpha or theta states. The critical guard at the door takes a coffee break, And suddenly, all those dots you collected starts floating around and bumping into each other. That is when the magic happens. I want to tell you about Albert Einstein. Pretty smart guy, right? He knew this. He understood that he couldn't just think his way to a breakthrough using logic alone. So he had this trick, this little game he played with his own biology. He would sit in his favorite chair to take a nap, but he would hold a rock in his hand, and on the floor, right beneath his hand, he would place a metal plate. He would let himself drift, drifting down from being awake into that twilight zone, that theta state, where the dreams start to mix with reality. And just as he fell asleep, his hand would relax, the rock would fall. Clang! It would hit the plate and wake him up. He didn't want to sleep. He wanted to surf the edge of sleep, because right there, in that slippery moment between waking and dreaming, that is where the genius lives. You need to understand this. You have a supercomputer between your ears, but you are only using it when the monitor is on. You are ignoring the background processing. We spend, maybe 20 years of our lives sleeping? And 3 to 5 years of that is just dreaming. Most people treat sleep like a waste of time. They think it's just a shutdown mode, but it's not. It's a work mode. History is filled with people who knew how to use this illegal power. Mary Shelley? She didn't sit down and logically deduce the plot of Frankenstein. She dreamt it. Paul McCartney? The melody for Yesterday, one of the most covered songs in history, he woke up with it playing in his head. The periodic table of elements? A chemist saw the structure in a dream. They weren't just lucky. They were using a different operating system. So, how do you do it? How do you actually program this computer instead of just hoping for a random glitch of brilliance? It starts with intention. You know how, if you have to catch an early flight, say at 4 a.m., you set your alarm, but you wake up 2 minutes before it goes off? You have done that, right? We all have. That is your brain following a command you gave it hours ago. It has an internal clock. Well, if your brain can wake you up at a specific time just because you asked it, what else can it do? The key is to give it a job before you clock out. Before you go to sleep, instead of scrolling through social media and filling your head with garbage, ask yourself a question. How do I solve this problem? How can I make this better? Don't try to answer it. Just ask it. Drop the pebble in the pond and walk away. Questions are the answer. If you ask a different question, you get a different answer. If you ask, why is this so hard? Your brain will give you a list of reasons why it sucks. But if you ask, what is the one thing I haven't tried yet? Your subconscious goes to work. It spends the next 8 hours digging through that pile of dots you collected, looking for a connection. But then, and this is where everyone fails, this is where the tragedy happens. You wake up. You are in that beautiful, groggy theta state. The ideas are there. They are bubbling up like fresh water. And what do? You reach for your phone. Boom, gone. You flood your brain with emails, texts, bad news, other people's lives. You kick yourself out of the creative state and slam right back into that stressed out beta state. You are reacting to the world instead of creating it. You have to protect that first hour. You have to be jealous of it. Keep a journal by your bed. Capture the gold before it evaporates. Because, really, creativity isn't about adding more stress. It's about removing the interference. It's about asking the right question, stepping back, and letting the machine do what it was built to do. It's not magic. It's engineering. You are engineering your own biology to produce genius. And frankly, it is a lot more fun than staring at a blank wall waiting for lightning to... Now, once you have the dots and you have the state of mind, there is one more piece, the execution. Because you can dream up Frankenstein or the iPhone, but if you don't know how to put it into the world, it's just a ghost. And this is where we have to talk about courage and being willing to look like a fool. This is where we have to talk about the thing that stops almost everyone. You can collect all the dots in the world. You can have the most diverse, colorful collection of experiences. You can be a physicist who paints and studies ancient Greek poetry, and you can have the best morning routine in existence. You can do the Einstein trick with the rock. You can write down your dreams, but it all means absolutely nothing. Zero. If you don't have the courage to look like a complete idiot. I mean it. You have to be willing to look foolish. Because, think about it, a creative idea, by definition, is something new. It hasn't been done before. And if it hasn't been done before, it looks weird. It looks wrong. It looks like it doesn't belong. And our instinct, that cocoon instinct we talked about, screams at us to keep our mouths shut so we don't get laughed at. The secret is, the best ideas always sound crazy at first. There is this story, a wonderful story, about a TV show back in the 80s. They had booked a huge star. I think it was Johnny Depp, but he canceled at the last minute. Panic. Absolute panic. The producers are sitting around a table, sweating, trying to figure out who to book. They are suggesting quarterbacks, news anchors, the standard blue dot idea. And then, the lowest paid writer in the room, a guy nobody really listened to, pipes up and says, I can do something with liquid nitrogen. Now, imagine that. You are looking for a celebrity guest, and this guy suggests freezing an onion. The boss told him to shut up. Literally, shut up, Bill, because it didn't fit the pattern. But the writer kept going. He painted a picture. He said, no, look, we freeze a marshmallow, we eat it, smoke comes out of our nose. It'll be funny. He connected two dots that had no business being together, hard science and sketch comedy. And because he was willing to look stupid, because he was willing to be the different dot in the room, that writer, Bill Nye, became the science guy. He changed the world for an entire generation of kids. But he could only do that because he cracked the cocoon. He didn't stay in his lane. You need to understand this. The future, the world we are heading into, it doesn't belong to the people who can just follow instruction. We have machines for that now. We have computers that can calculate faster than you, memorize more than you, and organize data better than you ever will. The logical work, that is going to be outsourced. It's gone. But what cannot be outsourced, what a machine cannot do, is dream. A machine cannot wake up with a melody in its head because it broke up with its girlfriend. A machine cannot look at a wine press and see a printing press because of a hunch. The future belongs to the creatives. It belongs to the dot connected. It belongs to the people who are brave enough to ask, what if, instead of just, what is? So, here is my challenge, and I want you to really take this seriously. I want you to do something today that makes no sense. I want you to go out and collect a dot that scares you a little. If you are a tech guy, go take a pottery class. If you are an artist, go read a book about quantum mechanics. Go talk to someone who disagrees with you politically, not to argue, but just to see how their brain works. Treat people like puzzle pieces. When you see someone weird on the bus or the plane, don't put on your headphones. Lean in. Ask a question. How is this like that? Because, really, creativity is the only infinite resource we have. We can run out of oil. We can run out of land. But we can never run out of ideas as long as we keep colliding with it, as long as we keep the walls down. You have the machinery. You have the alpha states, the theta states, the dream state. You know that you need to protect that first hour of the morning. Please, for the love of physics, stop looking at your phone as soon as you open your eyes. Let your brain breathe. Let it work for you. And one last thing. It's kind of important. If you found a little spark here, if something in this rambling clicked, then you are probably one of us. You are a dot collector, and we need more of you. So, do me a favor. Down below, there is a button that says subscribe. Click it. Not because I need the numbers. Well, maybe I do. But because you need the reminder. You need to be around other people who are asking these questions. And leave a comment. Tell me, what is one weird thing you are going to do this week to crack your cocoon? I really want to know. Now, go. Go collect some dots. The world is waiting for your next idea, and it better be a good one. See you next time.
Space might be finite, immeasurable. Volume, but it has no edge, no end in. The way you're imagining it. Imagine a bug, a tiny flat bug living on the surface of a ball. This bug can only perceive two dimensions. It can move forward, backward, left, right. But it has no concept of up or down for this. Bug, the surface of the ball is the entire universe. There's nothing else. Now, does this bug's universe have an edge? No. The bug can walk in any direction forever and it will never hit a wall, never fall off, never reach a sign that says end of space. But wait, is the bug's universe infinite? Also, no. The surface of a ball has a definite size. It's measurable. It's finite. So, how can something be finite but have no edge? Here's the secret. The surface curves. It wraps around. If the bug walks in a straight line long enough, it ends up exactly where it started without ever turning around. The bug circumnavigates its entire universe just by going straight. Finite but unbounded, limited size, but no boundary. That's the key. Now, here's where it gets interesting. The bug can actually discover that its space is curved without ever leaving it, without ever floating up into the third dimension and looking down at the ball. The bug can figure it out from within. How? By doing geometry, by measuring things carefully. Now, here's where it gets interesting. The bug can actually discover that its space is curved without ever leaving it, without ever floating up into the third dimension, and looking down at the ball. The bug can figure it out from within. How? By doing geometry, by measuring things carefully. Let me show you what I mean. On a flat surface, if you draw a triangle and measure all three angles, they always add up to exactly 180. Always, every triangle, no exceptions. But on a curved surface like a sphere, the angles add up to more than 180. The triangle is fatter than it should be. On a flat surface, if you draw a circle and measure the circumference, it's always a little more than 6 times the radius. That's just how circles work. But on a sphere, the circumference is less than you'd expect. The surface curves, so the circle pinches. The bug can do these measurements. The bug can discover through careful geometry that something is wrong with its space, that the rules don't work the way they should. That space itself is curved. And here's the beautiful part. The bug does this without ever leaving its universe, without ever seeing it from the outside. The curvature is intrinsic. It's built into the fabric of space itself. Our universe might be exactly like that. We might be the bugs. Einstein told us that. Space is curved, not metaphorically, not as a mathematical trick, actually. Physically curved. The fabric of space, the void between stars, the emptiness you're sitting in right now, it bends. And what causes the bending? Mass, matter, energy. Every star curves space. Every planet curves space. Even you curve space just a tiny bit. The more mass of something is, the more it warps the space around it. So here's the picture. Our three-dimensional space might curve in a fourth dimension that we can't perceive directly, just like the bug's two-dimensional surface curves. In the third dimension, we can't see the curvature by looking at it, but we can detect it, we can measure it, and if our space curves enough, if it curves all the way around, then it closes on itself like the surface of a sphere. But in 3 dimensions, what would that mean? It would mean the universe is finite, it has a definite size, a measurable volume, but it would also mean the universe has no edge, no boundary, no wall. If you got in a spaceship and flew in a perfectly straight line, just kept going and going, for billions of years you wouldn't hit a wall, you wouldn't fall off an edge, you wouldn't reach the end, you'd end up back where you started. Here's the truth. The universe might be finite, but unbounded, limited, but edgeless. It might have a size, but no border. And this answers the question everyone asks, the question that keeps people up at night. What's outside the universe? Nothing. Not empty space, not darkness, not some other realm, nothing. Because outside doesn't exist. Think about it. What's outside the bug's universe? What's outside the surface of the sphere? From the bug's perspective, the question makes no sense. The surface is everything. There is no outside. For us, it might be the same. Space-time is everything. There is no outside. The question assumes something that doesn't exist. And now comes the shock. This isn't just philosophy. This isn't just speculation. We can test it. We are testing it. Remember how the bug could detect curvature by measuring triangles and circles. We can do the same thing on a cosmic scale. We can look at the largest structures in the universe. We can measure the angles of giant triangles formed by distant galaxies. We can check if the geometry works out the way it should for flat space. And what do we find? So far, the universe looks very close to flat on large scales. Very close. But very close doesn't mean exactly flat. There could be a tiny curvature that we haven't detected yet, a slight curve that would only show up at scales larger than we can currently measure. If the universe is positively curved like a sphere, then it's finite and closed. You travel far enough, you come back home. If the universe is negatively curved like a saddle, then it's infinite and open. It goes on forever in every direction. If the universe is perfectly flat, then it's also infinite. Space just keeps going, with no end. But here's what we know for certain. Whether the universe is finite or infinite, it doesn't have an edge. It doesn't have a wall. There's no boundary. You can reach where space just stops. Either it goes on forever or it wraps around on itself. Those are the options. Edge of the universe isn't one of them. Let me say that again because it's important. Space doesn't end either. It's infinite and keeps going, or it's finite and loops back. But there's no wall, no border, no end in the way your brain wants there to be. The universe is not a room. It's not a box. It's not contained inside something larger. The universe is everything, and outside is not a place that outside might not exist. You might be wondering, okay, space is curved, but curved into what? If the bug surface is curved in three-dimensional space, then our three-dimensional space must be curved in what? A fourth dimension. And here's where we have to be careful. We don't need a higher dimension for space to be curved. The curvature is intrinsic. It's a property of space itself, measurable from within without reference to anything outside. Let me explain what I mean. When we say the bug's universe is curved, we're describing it from the outside. We see the ball, we see the surface wrapping around, but the bug doesn't see any of that. The bug just notices that geometry doesn't work, right? Triangles are weird, circles are weird, something is off. The bug discovers curvature through measurement, not through seeing a higher dimension. We're in the same situation. We can measure the curvature of our space without needing to see it from a fourth dimension. We just do geometry on large scales and check if the results match, flat geometry or not. Here's the key. Curvature is not about bending into something. Curvature is about geometry, being different than expected. That's the definition. A curved space is a space where the rules of flat geometry don't apply. So stop trying to visualize the universe as a balloon floating in some larger space. That image is misleading. There's no larger space. There's just our space with its own intrinsic geometry, which might be curved. Now, let's talk about something else, because curvature isn't the only strange thing about space. Einstein told us something even more remarkable. Space and time are connected. They're woven together into a single fabric called space-time. And when we talk about the curvature of the universe, we're really talking about the curvature of space-time. This matters because it changes everything. Here's an example. You probably know that time passes at different rates depending on where you are. A clock on a mountain runs slightly faster than a clock in a valley. A clock on a speeding airplane runs slightly slower than a clock on the ground. These aren't mechanical errors. These aren't problems with the clocks. Time itself runs at different rates in different places. And why? Because of curvature. Mass curves space-time. And when space-time is curved, time flows differently in different locations. Think about what this means. Near a massive object like the Earth, space-time is curved. And that curvature affects not just space, but time. Clocks tick slower near massive objects. Time literally passes more slowly. This has been measured. This is not speculation. Scientists have taken identical atomic clocks, put one on a plane and one on the ground, flown the plane around, and compared the clocks afterward. There, different by tiny amounts, but measurably different. The clock on the plane experienced slightly less time than the clock on the ground because it was higher up, further from Earth's mass, in a region where space-time is less curved. But wait, there's more. This curvature of space-time isn't just an interesting fact, it's the explanation for gravity. You were probably taught that gravity is a force, that the Earth pulls on you, that there's some invisible rope connecting you to the planet, yanking you downward. But that's not what's happening. Here's the truth. You're not being pulled down. You're following the natural path through curved space-time. Let me try to make this intuitive. Imagine you're in a spaceship, far from any planet or star, no gravity, you're floating. Now the spaceship starts accelerating, it fires its engines and speeds up. What happens to you? You get pressed against the back of the ship. You feel weight, you feel exactly like you would if you were standing on a planet. Einstein realized something profound. There's no way to tell the difference. If you're in a closed box and you feel weight, you cannot determine whether you're on a planet being pulled by gravity or in a spaceship that's accelerating. The experiences are identical. This is called the principle of equivalence. And it's the foundation of everything. Here's why it matters. If acceleration and gravity feel the same, then maybe they are the same. Maybe gravity isn't a force at all. Maybe what we call gravity is actually the effect of curve. Space-time. Think about it this way. When you drop a ball, it falls, you think gravity is pulling it down, but actually the ball is just following a straight line through curved space-time. That sounds crazy, right? How can falling be a straight line? Because in curved space-time, straight lines look curved from our perspective. The ball is taking the most natural path through space-time, the shortest path, the path that any free object would follow. We call these paths geodesics. And in flat space-time, geodesics are straight lines, but in curved space-time, geodesics look curved to us. They look like orbits, like falling, like the motion we associate with gravity. So the Earth isn't pulling you down. The Earth is curving the space-time around it. And you, by existing in that curved space-time, naturally move toward the Earth, not because of a force, but because of geometry. Now watch this. This explains something that puzzled scientists for centuries. Why do all objects fall at the same rate? A feather and a hammer in. A vacuum hit the ground at the same time. Why? If gravity were a force, you'd expect heavier objects to experience more pull, but they also have more inertia, more resistance to acceleration. And these two effects exactly cancel. It seems like a coincidence, but in the curved space-time picture, it's not a coincidence at all. Objects aren't being pulled. They're following geodesics. And the geodesic doesn't care what the object is made of. A feather and a hammer follow the same curved path through space-time because the path is determined by the geometry, not by the object. Here's the secret. Gravity is not a force. Gravity is geometry. The curvature of space-time is what we experience as gravity. And this brings us back to the question of the universe. If mass curves space-time and the universe is full of mass, then the universe is full of curvature. Every star, every galaxy, every particle of matter contributes to the overall curvature of space-time. The total amount of matter and energy in the universe determines its overall shape, its geometry, whether it's curved like a sphere or curved like a saddle or perfectly flat. And that geometry determines the fate of the universe. If there's enough mass, space curves. Positively, the universe is closed. It's finite. And if you wait long enough, it might even collapse back on itself. A big crunch. If there's not enough mass, space curves negatively. The universe is open. It's infinite. It expands forever, getting colder and emptier. If there's exactly the right amount of mass, space is flat. The universe is infinite. It expands forever, but just barely right, on the edge between collapse and eternal expansion. Which one is our universe? We've measured it. We've looked at the cosmic background, radiation, the leftover glow from the Big Bang. We've studied the distribution of galaxies. We've calculated the total mass and energy. And the answer is our universe is very close to flat, remarkably close. So close that it's almost suspicious, but very close to. Flat leaves room for mystery. There, could be a tiny curvature. We haven't detected. And even if it is perfectly flat, the question remains. Why? Why? This particular geometry and not some other? Here's what we know for sure. Space is curved. Mass causes curvature. The geometry of the universe depends on what's in it. And that geometry determines whether the universe is finite or infinite, whether it has a shape that closes on itself or extends forever. The universe is not a fixed stage where things happen. The universe is a dynamic fabric that bends and warps and shapes itself according to its contents. And we're part of that fabric. We curve it, and it curves us. So let's bring this all together because we've covered a lot of ground, and I want to make sure the picture is clear. Space is curved. The universe might be finite, but without edges. There's no outside. Gravity isn't a force, but geometry. Mass tells space-time how to curve, and curved space-time tells mass how to move. But there's one more thing we need to talk about, and it's the hardest part of all. Our intuition is wrong, completely, fundamentally, hopelessly wrong about all of this. And that's okay. Here's why. Your brain struggles with these ideas. You evolved on a small planet, moving at slow speeds, experiencing weak gravity your ancestors needed to throw spears at. Animals find ripe fruit, avoid predators they did not need to. Understand the curvature of space in me. So your brain built a model of reality that works for everyday life. A model where space is flat, where time flows at the same rate everywhere, where things fall because they're pulled by invisible forces, where everything is contained inside something larger. That model is wrong, but it works well enough for surviving on Earth. So evolution kept it. The problem comes when you try to. Think about the cosmos. You try to. Imagine the shape of the universe when you ask questions like, what's outside? Your brain uses its everyday model and gets nonsense answers. Here's the truth. The universe is not required to make sense to your intuition. The universe is required to be consistent with itself. And it is. The mathematics works. The predictions match observations. The theory holds together. It just doesn't feel right. And that's your problem, not the universe's problem. Now, let me address something that might be bothering you. If the universe could be finite and without edges, if it curves back on itself, what does that actually mean for us? What difference does it make? Well, here's one way to think about it. Imagine you're an astronaut. You get in the most advanced spaceship ever built. You pick a direction and you start flying perfectly straight, no turns, just forward forever. In an infinite universe, you fly forever and never return. Every moment takes you somewhere new. Space goes on without end. But in a finite curved universe, something strange happens. After billions of years of travel, the stars start to look familiar. The galaxies seem like ones you've passed before, and eventually you arrive back at Earth, right where you started. You circumnavigated the universe without ever turning around, just by going straight. That's what it means for space to be curved and closed. Straight lines become loops. Forward forever becomes back to the beginning. Now, practically speaking, this doesn't matter much for our daily lives. The universe is so large that even if it's finite, it's far too big for us to ever circum. We'll never build a ship fast enough or live long enough to complete the journey. But conceptually, it changes everything. It means the universe doesn't need an outside. It doesn't need a container. It doesn't need edges or walls or boundaries. It can be complete in itself, self-contained, everything that exists, existing within a structure that loops back and closes. Here's the key. The question, what's outside the universe, assumes a certain kind of universe. It assumes space is like a room contained inside something larger. But if space curves back on itself, that assumption is wrong. There is no outside. The question dissolves. It's not that we don't know the answer. It's that the question doesn't apply. You know what? People hate this answer. They really do. They want there to be an outside. They want there to be something more, something beyond. Their brains crave it. But the universe doesn't owe us satisfaction. The universe is what it is. And part of understanding physics is accepting that some questions are based on false premises. What's outside the universe might be one of those questions. Not a mystery we haven't solved yet, but a question that was never valid to begin with. Now watch this. There's something beautiful about this picture, something I don't want you to miss. We are tiny, unimaginably small compared to the cosmos. We live on a speck of dust orbiting an ordinary star in an ordinary galaxy among hundreds of billions of galaxies. And yet we figured this out. We, the bugs on the surface, discovered that our space is curved. We measured the geometry. We tested the predictions. We built a theory that explains gravity as curvature and describes the shape of the universe itself. We can't see the curvature directly. We can't float up into a higher dimension and look down, but we deduced it through mathematics, through careful measurement, through the power of human thought. That's remarkable. It's genuinely miraculous that creatures made of atoms can understand the fabric of spacing. That we can ask, what is the shape of everything, and actually make progress toward an answer. Let me leave you with something to think about. We don't know for certain if the universe is finite or infinite. We don't know if it curves back on itself or extends forever. The measurements are close to flat, but close isn't certain. What we do know is that the universe is far stranger than our intuition suggests. The space bends, time stretches, geometry depends on. What's in it? The cosmos might be a closed loop with no outside, or an infinite expanse with no end. Either way, there's no wall, no edge, no boundary where space stops and something else begins. The universe is infinite with an end, or finite without edges, or infinite without edges, but never, never a box with walls. Here's the deepest part. When you look up at the night sky, you're not looking at objects scattered inside a giant room. You're looking at matter embedded in curved space-time. Every star, every galaxy is part of the fabric, and the fabric shapes itself around its contents. The universe isn't a container holding things. The universe is the things and the space between them, woven together, curving and flowing and existing as one unified structure. There is no outside, because there is nothing but the universe. It is complete. It is whole. It is everything. I know this is hard to accept. I know your brain wants more, wants an answer that fits into familiar categories, wants to know what's beyond, but sometimes the deepest understanding comes from accepting that certain questions don't have the kind of answers we expect. That reality is structured differently than we imagined, that the universe is under no obligation to make intuitive sense. So what's outside the universe? Nothing. Not empty. Space, not darkness, not another. Universe. Nothing, because outside is not a concept that applies. The universe might be finite, it might be infinite, but either way, it's everything. And everything doesn't have an outside. That's not a failure of knowledge. That's a feature of reality. That's how the cosmos actually is. And we figured that out. Tiny creatures on a tiny planet looking up at the stars, doing geometry, testing predictions, pushing the boundaries of understanding. We